Now, from WYDC TV, this is Big Fox News at 10.
Thank you for tuning in to Big Fox News tonight. I'm Scott Beadle. In 2 weeks, Kathy Hochul will be sworn in as New York's first female governor. Today, she held a press conference to discuss the transition from the outgoing Cuomo administration. Big Fox's Matt Kleindinst is in Corning tonight and joins us with highlights from that conference.
Good evening, Scott. During her press conference, Kathy Hochul promised to make a clean break from the toxic work environment fostered by Governor Cuomo, while at the same time continuing the administration's policy goals.
Good afternoon, and thank you for being here.
In her first press conference since Governor Cuomo announced his resignation, Kathy Hochul made it clear she's prepared to lead the Empire State.
I want people to know that I'm ready for this, and it's not something we expected or asked for, but I am fully prepared to assume the responsibilities as the 57th governor of the state of New York.
Hochul says she's looking forward to addressing issues regarding increased COVID cases seen throughout the state. She also says she will continue to expand upon policies brought forth by the Cuomo administration.
I know the job. I fought for the same policies. That's why I'm more prepared than anyone could possibly be for this position.
However, Hochul made it clear that she will make a clean break from Governor Cuomo.
I think it's very clear that the governor and I have not been close, physically or otherwise, in terms of much time. At the end of my term, whenever it ends, no one will ever describe my administration as a toxic work environment.
Hochul will finish out the rest of Governor Cuomo's term starting on August 24th. Matt Kleindinst, Big Fox, WYDC in Corning.
The Chemung County Courthouse and Elmira City Hall were evacuated this morning due to a bomb threat. According to police, an unidentified man called 911 saying a bomb was set to go off at 11:30 at the courthouse. Both buildings were immediately cleared and 2 canine bomb squads were called in. No suspicious devices were found, and the buildings were deemed safe for workers at 12:45. The New York State Fair will now be requiring indoor masking for all visitors. Yesterday, the Onondaga County executive mandated that everyone older than 2 years wear masks indoors. This comes as the county positivity rates climb to 3.5%. Now, the New York State Fair still plans to run at full capacity for the entire 18-day event. The fair kicks off on August 20th. Full FDA approval of Pfizer's COVID-19 vaccine is expected sometime this fall. Brianna Arredondo gives us a look at the process.
The Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine was the first of 3 COVID-19 shots the FDA approved for emergency use last winter. And public health experts tell us that sign-off came after a lot of scrutiny.
They actually required a very large phase 3 trial, 30,000 or more participants, which both Pfizer and Moderna and J&J had to do. They required 2 extra months of safety data after the clinical trial was done.
That's virologist Dr. Michael Tang with USF Health speaking remotely. He tells us the full FDA approval process requires 6 months of safety data and more information as it comes in from doses going out. The FDA is currently reviewing Pfizer's summer application for full approval, looking at how the vaccines are made, stored, and reported side effects.
So they basically have to read over hundreds of thousands of pages of data and safety and efficacy.
The process usually takes 10 months, but the FDA is doing a priority review for Pfizer within 6 months. The White House COVID-19 response team tells us they realize some people may wait for it.
I think that for people, if that's the reason why you're not yet getting vaccinated because you perceive that there's some difference in the level of safety once it receives full approval, then that would make a difference for those folks.
Dr. Webb says it's very likely approval will come in September. And after over 100 million doses in arms so far, he says that's evidence enough the vaccine works.
I want to be unequivocally clear. There's nothing experimental about these vaccines. The authorization that they have and the evidence that we have tells us with real certainty that they're very safe and very effective.
Earlier today, Senate Democrats managed to pass the framework for their $3.5 trillion reconciliation package. The legislation aims to address child care for working families, climate change, and expand Medicare. Republicans staunchly oppose the proposal and hope moderate Democrats will join them in blocking the bill. Madeline Rivera has the latest.
The concurrent resolution as amended is agreed to.
Senate Democrats are celebrating a victory Wednesday, passing their $3.5 trillion budget blueprint at almost 4 a.m. The crucial step will allow Democrats to ultimately pass the bill with a simple majority that, if signed, would mark the biggest expansion of the federal safety net in decades.
What we're doing here is not easy. Democrats have labored for months to reach this point, and there are many labors to come.
The package, to be mainly financed by tax hikes on the wealthy and corporations, includes funding for many progressive initiatives like Medicare expansion, fighting climate change, and boosting family programs. Republicans, unable to stop Democrats from using the special budget process, instead forced votes on dozens of amendments.
Does anybody in America think that a bill written by Bernie Sanders is going to leave your pocketbook alone? Of course, every family is going to feel the impact of it.
The House must pass a budget resolution too, but the challenge to maintain Democratic support is growing. Some moderate Democrats in the House are worried about the effects the massive package could have on inflation, especially on the heels of a $1 trillion bipartisan infrastructure deal. The Biden administration trying to woo moderate senators Wednesday morning.
It's paid for. It will be it'll be putting forth programs that help everyday citizens. You know, there's a lot to like for Kristen Sinema, Joe Manchin.
Senate committees will now begin discussions over the details of the final reconciliation package. Senator Schumer set a deadline to review the bill the week of September 15th. In Washington, Mallory Rivera, Fox News.
President Biden's American Rescue Plan came with a hefty $1.9 trillion price tag. Tens of billions were set aside to help struggling Americans unable to pay their rent avoid being kicked out on the street during a global pandemic. But many tenants and their landlords who applied for the funds say they still haven't received them. Kevin Cork has more on the mounting frustration in the midst of the CDC's latest eviction moratorium.
More than 11 million Americans behind on rent, continuing to live in limbo. The CDC's latest eviction moratorium is expected to last until October 3rd, but what comes next remains unclear. Lawmakers hope this extension provides enough time for the billions in federal aid from President Biden's American Rescue Plan to be distributed to those in need.
The money is out there, $56 billion spread around the country to be delivered to renters and to landlords.
But officials say the funds aren't being allocated fast enough, a situation causing distress for not just renters, but landlords as well. And for some, the frustration is proving catastrophic.
The preliminary details that we have right now is that this shooting resulted over a dispute over rent not being paid.
Police in Las Vegas still investigating a deadly shooting early Tuesday after a 78-year-old landlord allegedly opened fire on 3 of his tenants late on rent.
The suspect was inside the residence when officers arrived. Through negotiations, the male suspect exited and he was taken into custody.
Officials pronouncing 2 female victims dead on scene, while a male victim remains in critical condition after suffering 9 gunshot wounds. Meanwhile, the latest eviction moratorium faces legal challenges, with at least one Supreme Court justice suggesting that the CDC had no legal authority to issue such a ruling. In Washington, I'm Kevin Cork, Fox News.
Inflation rose once again in July. The 5.4% increase in the Consumer Price Index in the year ending in July is stronger than expected, though it's the same pace as in June. The monthly increase is 0.5%. Most of the price increases this spring have been from sectors hit hard by the pandemic, but used car prices, airfares, and fuel costs have bounced back. Food prices continued to increase in July, up 0.7% from June and 3.4% from a year ago. The Taliban is very quickly regaining control of Afghanistan, threatening to erase decades of gains under Western-backed governments. Benjamin Hall has more from London.
The situation in Afghanistan is deteriorating quickly, with the Taliban taking over 3 more provincial capitals on Wednesday. That makes 8 capitals in just 6 days. The militants now occupy at least 65% of the country, including the entire northeast, and they're starting to consolidate control in major cities.
The situation is under control. Our Taliban fighters are patrolling in the city. all the people are very happy. There's nothing to worry about.
Afghan President Ashraf Ghani is now asking for reinforcements from warlords in the north as officials scramble to protect Kabul. The Taliban offensive comes as U.S. forces finalize their withdrawal. But after 2 decades of war, Pentagon officials say the Taliban could be back in charge in as little as 90 days. President Biden says he has no regrets about his decision to pull out, saying the Afghan people have to determine their own future.
We lost death and injury, thousands of American personnel. They've got to fight for themselves, fight for their nation.
The U.S. military is still conducting airstrikes on Taliban targets, but so far ground troops have largely avoided the fighting. Meanwhile, the State Department is making plans for a post-war Afghanistan, threatening the Taliban with isolation if they take Kabul by force.
In order for us to be able to recognize any future government of Afghanistan and to provide assistance to it, it must emerge from a political settlement.
U.S. and NATO combat forces are expected to complete their withdrawal by the end of this month. In London, Benjamin Hall, Fox News.
Still ahead tonight, with vaccination requirements becoming more common, what do you do if you lose your proof of vaccination card or you don't have a copy?
We need to do everything possible to protect those that are not vaccinated. And those that are not vaccinated get protected in 2 ways: by those that are eligible for vaccination getting vaccinated, and by wearing a mask.
Hear what the CDC says about what you need to do if you find yourself in this situation.
Here's your local stock market update from Big Fox. Now, your Twin Tiers forecast from Big Fox.
Tonight's Big Fox forecast is brought to you by William Mattar. Good evening, everyone. Sweltering heat will continue into tomorrow. Unfortunately, we do have a heat advisory from noon until 7 o'clock in the evening. Highs will be in the 90s. Our heat index will be well into the 100s, and those two combined could cause or increase the risk of heat illnesses. It is going to be sticky tomorrow as those temperatures climb up into the 90s. It's going to start to feel a little bit uncomfortable. Our heat index will be between 100 to 105 degrees, and it looks like the heat will continue at least through the end of the week. But take a look at our dew points. It's been in the 70s and will stay in the 70s through your Friday, and then on Saturday a big dip in those temperatures, or at least our dew point temperatures, and that's because we have a cold front coming in, and it will drag drier and cooler air in, and so it's going to make this weekend feel so much more comfortable. So for tomorrow, if you're going to be doing any yard work, here's a look at what you can expect. Temperature readings around 77 degrees at 7 o'clock. We warm up to around 85 degrees by 10, and then close to around 90 degrees by 3 o'clock. There is the possibility of a few showers and thunderstorms during the day as well. So it's going to be quite hot, and it is going to feel like the 90s to 100 degrees, so it is going to be feeling quite hot outside. So here's our average high, around 82 degrees. Tomorrow we're going to be above normal, as well as Friday. Our heat index close to 100 degrees, and then a big drop as that cold front comes in, as highs will only be around 77 degrees. So there is some relief in sight. This comes as high pressure builds in behind the storm system that will be moving through by the end of the week, so it is going to feel a lot more comfortable this weekend. Our future radar is showing a few isolated showers and thunderstorms developing for tonight into early tomorrow. And then during the day, I think we'll stay mainly dry. However, in the afternoon, there is a possibility of more showers and thunderstorms. Then some of these thunderstorms could bring some heavy to moderate rain across much of our hometowns. And then it looks like heavy rain off and on from Thursday night into early Friday. There is the possibility of more rain for Friday, and there could be a line of strong thunderstorms moving in, bringing gusty winds and also some downpours. So this will continue into the evening hours on Friday before that drier air moves in. So here's a look at your forecast. Tonight we drop down into the low 70s. Highs tomorrow will be around 93 degrees in Corning. Again, it's going to feel like 100 to 102 degrees. Your extended forecast calls for a dramatic drop in our temperatures by the weekend, with highs in the 70s, and we should be close to normal with a refreshing air in place by early next week.
After getting your first dose of the COVID-19 vaccine, you're given a card that says which vaccine you got, as well as when and where you got the shot. So what happens if you lose that card? Mandy Gaither has more on what the CDC says to do in today's Health Minute.
From the U.S. military to some big corporations and the most populated city in the U.S.
What we have put in place related to indoor dining, indoor entertainment, indoor fitness is the shape of things to come.
Vaccine requirements are becoming more common as officials continue to say getting vaccinated is the best protection against COVID-19 and the highly contagious Delta variant.
We need to do everything possible to protect those that are not vaccinated. And those that are not vaccinated get protected two ways: by those that are eligible for vaccination getting vaccinated, and by wearing a mask.
With more vaccine requirements, you'll need proof of vaccination, which is on the card providers give you when getting a shot. If you don't have a copy or have lost your vaccination card, the CDC says to get in touch with your vaccine provider to access your vaccination record. Places like CVS say a new card can be printed, while others like Walmart now provide a digital vaccine record. You can also contact your state health department's immunization information system. The CDC says to take a picture of your card as a backup copy. For Health Minute, I'm Mandy Gaither.
Several Virginia police dogs are being honored for their work over this past year. Brendan King spoke with the officers who fight crime alongside them and explains why so many of these dogs are now retiring.
Here, the best in narcotic detection work at Henrico Police.
They'll go and they'll keep working until you tell them to stop.
Alongside his handler, Officer John Brandmeier, Canine Creed sniffs out illegal substances like cocaine, heroin, meth, and ecstasy.
A large amount of our calls are officers that are on a traffic stop that ask for a dog to come screen the vehicle to see if there's drugs inside.
Officer John Brandmeier.
Tuesday afternoon, Henrico Police Chief Eric English honored the current and 7 retiring canine partners who worked overtime throughout the pandemic.
We've made the changes and been able to adapt to those changes, and our canines provide an extremely valuable service to us.
Those changes adjusting to new legislation enacted just this year in Virginia.
With the legalization of marijuana, all the dogs that were previously certified on that odor had to be retired. So that kind of opened up the door for me personally to get into the unit.
We've noticed an uptick in crime on the law enforcement side of things.
Officer Garrett Bardenheier and his K9 Ghost track suspects accused of serious crimes, specializing in the apprehension of violent criminals.
I've helped significantly on several homicide cases where we try and locate things from shell casing to firearms to cell phones discarded. Good boy.
Right now, Henrico's unit operates with 9 active dogs, with no signs of slowing down anytime soon.
On the drug side, a lot of, unfortunately, what goes with drug use comes with crime.
Also, during this ceremony, the handlers were awarded the Chief's Eagle Award for their dedication and service to the community.
A woman visiting a popular tourist spot in Utah passed out during a hike, only to wake up to a very familiar voice. Aaron Cox shows us what happened when a famous TV star stopped to help.
Trying to make it. Delicate Arch has been on Minnie John's bucket list for as long as she can remember.
I'm obsessed with Utah, Arizona, and Nevada.
Minnie says her desire to hike up the arch was sheer absurdity because she's in her late 50s with diabetes and has an artificial knee.
Saved myself from having to hike up to all the other areas just because I wanted to hike up here.
Yet the hike was steeper than Minnie expected. And on Monday evening, about 15 minutes before she reached the arch, Minnie began to feel dizzy.
My husband and my son said, okay, let's just wait here. I said, no, it's getting late. You just go, I'll just sit here and I'll wait for you. So I sat there, I held my head in my hands, leaning forward because I just wanted to feel the breeze.
It's one of the last things Minnie remembers before she passed out, falling face forward, fracturing her nose.
The next thing I know, I am hearing a voice that sounded so familiar and just telling me, hello, ma'am, are you okay?
That was the voice of Julie Bowen, best known for her role as Claire Dunphy in the TV series Modern Family. Julie was hiking the trail with her sister, who just happens to be a doctor.
I realized no one's going to believe this story, so I said, can I have a picture? She bandaged me up really well, cleaned it up, just like the Good Samaritan. She did her thing, and she was so sweet. And they were so humble because neither one of them mentioned their names. So she said, you should be fine. She made sure that I had family to go down, take me back down.
A gesture and a trip Minnie will never forget.
If they weren't there at the right time, I could have, any scenario, I could have been lying there and bleeding. And whether they were stars or not, I think anyone and everyone who helped, would be the same. They would be the greatest.
Minnie says she passed out not because she didn't have enough water, but because she needed more electrolytes. She had just returned from the doctor when I spoke with her and had her stitches removed. She says her nose will be fully healed within 6 weeks.
If you happen to be a Stevie Nicks ticket holder, well, sorry, you're going to have to wait until next year to see her perform. Nicks announced she's canceling her 5 tour dates that were scheduled to start in September. The 73-year-old says she hopes she can reschedule in 2022. 2022 could prove to be a busy year for Nicks. Earlier this year, Mick Fleetwood said he'd like to reunite Fleetwood Mac for a farewell tour. Hackers have just scored what could be the biggest theft in the cryptocurrency industry. The decentralized finance platform, Poly Network, says $600 million was stolen from them. Poly Network says a vulnerability in its system allowed hackers to make off with the funds. The company begged the thieves to return the money, and it appears they might be listening, at least a little. By this morning, Poly Network says nearly $5 million had been returned. A Massachusetts man nearly caught a great white shark over the weekend. Katie Thompson spoke to him about that experience.
It started off as an average day on Nauset Beach for Matt Pisiak, surrounded by friends and family, drinking some beers, playing some cornhole, and taking a chance at catching some fish. But mid-game, Pisiak noticed something in the water behind his opponent.
I just saw the rod kind of start to go off behind him. The tip of it was bending. And from there, we just kind of ran over to it.
Pisiak politely asking his cousin to, quote, hold my beer before realizing he'd hooked a great white.
Right when the line went tight, you could see a really big gray shadow. And we all immediately knew it was probably a great white.
Not only the shadow, but a tail fin and a dorsal fin, exciting beachgoers and drawing a crowd.
He or she broke off pretty quickly. And that was it. I mean, disappeared back into the depths of the ocean, I guess.
Pisiak believes this all began when the shark went after a bigger fish that was on his bait.
There's no chance that the hook I was using for the fish would have even grabbed the shark.
We want to leave you with a smile tonight. It's time once again for one of the best shows offered by the cosmos. The Perseid meteor shower will peak from midnight tonight through dawn on Friday. Viewing should be especially optimal because the moon is at a crescent phase and will be setting early. That will create dark conditions that allow the shooting stars to be seen more easily. Stargazers in the northern hemisphere should be able to see up to 40 meteors per hour. Of course, that all depends on light pollution. The further you are from a city, the more you're likely to see. Thanks so much for joining us. Look to the skies and have a great night.